Today is Saturday, July 6th. America's political divide has been growing in recent decades, and it's gotten to a point where people aren't just disagreeing with each other, they also dislike each other. And that seems especially true with a contentious election just months away. Whether it's family members who can't see eye to eye or harsh comments on social media, it sometimes feels like we can't escape the extremes. So today, as many of us continue to celebrate America's independence, we wanted to go back and re-listen to a conversation we shared late last year with a guest who has done the research and found we all carry biases that may contribute to our country's current polarization. Dan Stone is a behavioral economics expert and associate professor at Bowdoin College. In his book, Undue Hate, he explores why Americans are so politically divided and explains the biases that keep us so fractured. He'll share some of those misleading, even false assumptions. And later, he offers possible solutions from the dinner table to the White House. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Dan Stone, thank you so much for joining us here on the Newsworthy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your book explores why people tend to dislike other people they disagree with. What are some of the top or main reasons you uncovered in your research?
Sort of the big reasons boil down to some of the biggest general cognitive biases. So I think the very biggest one is a thing called overprecision, which is a term that refers to our bias toward thinking we have a more clear, more precise understanding of something than we really do. When we feel we've been wronged by a neighbor or a friend or someone in the other political party, or a politician has done something which seems egregious, we jump to the conclusion that this reflects on their bad character, they're a bad person, and more often than not, there's more to the story than we realize. So overprecision is this overarching bias which just gets us all the time. We always think we know more than we do. Another really big general bias is technically called motivated reasoning. So that's a technical term for sort of wishful thinking or believing what we want to be true rather than what is true. And that can contribute to hostility because we want to believe that we're right. When we disagree with people, when we think we don't want to be wrong, so we search for explanations justifying our own correctness. And then when we, at some level face this question of why is it that they disagree with us, we're motivated to think that they have some ulterior motive for their opinions. And that ultimately results often from our desire to be right ourselves and believe in our own goodness.
Yeah, there tends to be a theme here of we give ourselves more credit than we're due and have kind of a negative bias toward other people that we disagree with.
Yeah, exactly. So when we disagree with other people, if we're overconfident in our own rightness and someone else has a different opinion, we're going to naturally be overconfident in their wrongness. If the true probability I was right was 50%, okay, the chance this other person who has a different opinion is right is also 50%. But if I overestimate the chance that I'm right at 90%, I'm going to think the chance they're right is only 10%, and I'm going to be too pessimistic about the chance that they know what they're talking about, and that's going to make me either think less of their general abilities or think less of their motives. Overconfidence in our own takes will make us underconfident in others, which will make us dislike others more than we should.
Can you give us maybe an example of one side, not really understanding the other side's actual beliefs and having kind of false beliefs? And maybe you could give us one of what Democrats tend to misunderstand about Republicans, and then what Republicans tend to misunderstand about Democrats.
So a big one is, although we are very polarized in a lot of ways, both Democrats and Republicans tend to overestimate how much hostility the other party feels toward them. If on a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 is the warmest feelings and 0 is the coldest feelings, our true feelings toward the other party are pretty cold. On average, they're down to something like in the 20s. But when you ask people to guess what the other side's feelings are on the scale, we tend to underestimate it and guess something like half of that, like in the teens or like 10. So when we overestimate their hostility toward us, that's a mistake that's going to make us think that there's the divide is greater than it is. And then we also tend to overestimate how polarized our opinions are on a lot of issues. Gun control, Democrats tend to think that we're more polarized on that than we are. Support for the police. There's a lot of data showing that Republicans underestimate Democratic support for the police in general. So there are a good number of issues out there where we agree, more than we realize.
Yeah. So you were saying we're kind of down to 20 on the hostility toward the other side. Is that the lowest you've seen? And why do you think that it is more hostile than maybe in the past?
It is pretty much the lowest that it's been since they've been measuring it this way. So this scale has been used going back a good number of decades now. And our feelings toward the other party on this scale, it's called a thermometer scale of feelings, started to decline in around 1980. So this isn't something that started in the last 10 years during the sort of Trump or social media era. It started, almost 50 years ago. So our feelings toward the out party on this scale were in the 40s, in the early 80s or late 70s, and have steadily declined since then. And it's a combination of factors. One big factor is that the parties used to be a lot more mixed up ideologically. So Republicans had some liberals and Democrats had some conservatives. And that caused members of Congress to cross party lines in their voting more often and interact across party lines more. There are changes in the media landscape, even before cable news and Fox News in the 90s. And then we had MSNBC moving to the left in the 2000s. But before that, there was talk radio in the 80s. The media has generally splintered and become more partisan and more ideological. And then after cable news, of course, we had online news and blogs, and then eventually social media, where the partisanship has just become more and more escalated.
So with more channels and more platforms, people are increasingly in their own echo chambers?
There is evidence of echo chambers in a lot of ways, but even when we do interact with the other side on social media, we tend to see the other side at its worst. So people behave badly on social media, and the people looking to make a name for themselves tend to not be representative of the other side. They tend to be more extreme. So it's not just belief confirming information. It's information that fires us up because it makes us think, look, we're going against a bunch of nut jobs on the other side. And so we really need to fight them as hard as we can.
And the extremes on both sides will likely be the loudest and most passionate, I would imagine.
Right. The loudest, the most overconfident. And those are the voices that get the most engagement on social media. There are some people that do a good job of articulating relatively nuanced and moderate and uncertain views in various ways online. But in general, it's confidence and certainty and demonization and fear that sell, of course.
And I do want to ask your take on the very contentious topic of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. It feels very emotional, very personal, especially when you're looking online at videos people have made, comments people are making on every post about this. What's your take on why this is so contentious and so personal, I guess, for people?
It just seems like it's just the quintessential example of a conflict which has spiraled and snowballed out of control over time because each side continues to demonize the other and be blind to their own sins and their own contributions to the conflict.
There also seems to be an identity issue at play here.
Right. And that just fires up the emotions because it's connected to religion, which is, in some ways the ultimate identity issue. It's tied to religion and race and politics. What is interesting and maybe even somewhat grounds for hope is that some of these identities are getting a bit confused now. So I think there are some people who have generally leaned left in the past that are sort of taking more right-leaning views on this issue and vice versa. And I think maybe, just maybe, this will help people to see that things are more complicated than they realized.
Still ahead, our guest weighs in on some big ideas for calming the political tensions in this country before the consequences become even more dire. Plus, he shares specific actions we can take to not only prevent family arguments, but also maybe learn something from the people we disagree with. That and more coming up. But first, a quick break for our sponsors. All right, I'm guessing you've experienced this too. You're tossing and turning, trying to get to sleep, or maybe it's the middle of the night, and you've got one leg under the sheets, another sticking out, and you just can't get comfortable. Well, if you run hot when you sleep, Boll & Branch has amazing options for you. Choose from 100% organic cotton percale that's made with a naturally cooling weave, or their linen, which is made from European flax to be light, airy, and softer than soft. I love that Boll & Branch offers such great options, but really, you cannot go wrong with Boll & Branch. I personally have stuck with their best-selling signature hemmed sheets. They're super breathable and are great for both cooler and warmer weather. I paired those sheets with a linen duvet set from Boll & Branch, and I honestly am so comfortable in my bed every night. It's all buttery soft and breathable, yet still cozy. So get your coolest, most comfortable sleep with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets when you use our promo code NEWSWORTHY at bollandbranch.com. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com, promo code NEWSWORTHY for 15% off plus free shipping. Exclusions apply, so see site for details. This episode is also brought to you by CrunchLabs. CrunchLabs Build Box is a STEM subscription where your kids get a really fun build-it-yourself toy in the mail. I actually put one of them together with my 3-year-old son since he always loves to see how things work. So even though we had to do it as a team because he's still too young to do it on his own, we both loved this project together and had fun playing with the final creation at the end. Older kids can build this on their own, and parents, that will of course make your life easier as you get a little time to yourself to get things done or relax. In fact, this summer, Camp CrunchLabs is perfect for kids around 8 and older. It's a virtual summer camp where kids get 12 build-it-yourself toys with one shipped every week. It's going to get your kids thinking like little engineers and showing off their newly built toys to their friends. They also get access to exclusive videos and weekly challenges. So last year, more than 1 million people tuned in each week to watch camp and try their luck at these challenges. So get this limited Camp CrunchLabs subscription and you get 2 boxes free, which is a $60 value. Simply go to crunchlabs.com/newsworthy to sign your kids up for Camp CrunchLabs today. Again, get 2 boxes free when you sign your kiddos up for Camp CrunchLabs at crunchlabs.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to our conversation. Though a quick note, you'll hear a mention or two about Thanksgiving, and that's because, as we mentioned in the intro, this conversation was recorded last November, and this is a replay. But of course, we feel this topic is very relevant as we celebrate America's Independence Day, and we're in the middle of a contentious election season. It's obviously, easy to argue and disagree with someone online, but what about when it's your own family? It seems like things can get especially tricky. And with Thanksgiving and the holidays coming up, how do you suggest people approach a conversation with a relative who doesn't share their political belief?
People do get into serious fights about politics with their family. And I've heard of family members who have grown to not even speak to each other because of political disagreements. And it's really sad. And I would say, first and foremost, don't let that happen. Even if you have a family member who is just driving you nuts by spouting off opinions that you think are completely wrong, don't let it poison the relationship. And in fact, there might be a political benefit to you not doing that, because I think ultimately the way that we win people over to our side politically is by showing them that we're decent people and our opinion should be respected. If I'm on the left and I get into a fight with my rightist uncle and that makes the uncle think that I'm a bad guy, that's just going to confirm to him that people on the left are bad in general. But if I can show him I'm a decent guy, even if I don't talk politics at all, and even if I just smile and nod when he goes off about his opinions, that could plant the seed that lefties are decent and maybe open up his mind and ask questions. Don't debate them. Don't try to persuade explicitly. Play the long game and play it soft. And when they say something that doesn't quite make sense, don't attack it, because then they're just going to get defensive, but gently pry into it. Okay, so where did you hear that? And, that source, you're pretty sure that's a trustworthy source? Ask gentle questions and be curious, not judgmental.
Sounds like that means we also have to have emotional control over ourselves to be able to react in that way when these issues that may feel important to us come up.
I guess I shouldn't take that for granted, but yeah, don't, it's all talk at the Thanksgiving dinner table, right? It's not like any of us are actually setting policy in the Middle East or setting any sort of policy. So the stakes, in a sense, are very low. So even if someone says something totally absurd, don't let it get to you. Take a breath. Even if you find yourself getting fired up, remember, it's just a bunch of hot air. And you're going to feel better and get along with them better, and everyone's going to be better off if you don't, lose your temper.
When we go from the family to society overall, what do you think can be done to calm political tension and divide across America and not just at the dinner table?
There are some well-informed people out there who think that one of the keys to solving this problem is to have more political parties. So right now it's sort of a zero-sum game between Republicans and Democrats, and we need to come up with some way to change the system to allow there to be more parties so we don't focus all of our sort of negative energy on a single enemy. Another policy option that's gotten a lot of support is open up the primaries to more voters, to not just the most extreme voters from one side, and give moderate voters a say in nominating the candidates who run for Congress. So there's one system for this that I think makes a lot of sense. A proposal for this is a system called Final Five voting, where essentially there'd be 5 candidates from different parties, and then people get to express their preferences 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and don't just vote for just one candidate. And that way, if there's one candidate who gets a reasonable amount of support across the board from the left and right, they can end up winning. So that's a way to reward lack of extremism. Another possibility would be for leaders at the very top, for someone like Biden or for our president to recognize at a national level that this is a serious national problem, and to sort of invest some major resources in getting the country to work on it, and to do something like bring in a third-party mediator to try to mediate these disputes between Republicans and Democrats in Congress and things like that. These are sort of far-out ideas, but I think we need to consider all these things, and I think we need our social media platforms helping as well, and in businesses at all levels, because if we continue to become more polarized and have more intense and even violent discord in our politics, it's not going to be good for business. It's not going to be, it's not sustainable. So we need to consider all kinds of major changes.
What final thought do you want to leave the individual listeners here today?
It's so easy to jump to those negative conclusions and to lose a friend, to lose a neighbor, to lose a family member, or to contribute to nasty political polarization more broadly. So being kind to those we disagree with really is something we all need to consciously try to do more of, and it'll build on itself and help us to overcome these problems at all levels.
Well, thank you again to Dan Stone for sharing his research and insights. His book is called Undo Hate, a behavioral economic analysis of hostile polarization in U.S. politics and beyond. So be sure to check it out. Thanks, as always, for listening and for your support of The Newsworthy. If you missed it yesterday, we did not have our regular news roundup due to the 4th of July holiday. Instead, we ran a discussion about the Supreme Court's recent ruling on presidential immunity, including the potential implications for the future and what effect it could have on a criminal case against former President Trump. So check out that from Friday if you missed it. Then join us again for your regular 10-minute daily news roundup next week. We'll be back on Monday to get you all caught up on the latest. Until then, have a great rest of the holiday weekend.